WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. Always a pleasure to have the real journalist on the program, and when they take some time out of their busy schedule to promote what they're doing. I love getting the backgrounds into the stories as a 3 decades-long journalist myself. David Scott, he's one of those real guys doing the real sports thing at HBO, of course, with Brian Gumbel. We love having these guys on when they have stories to tell, and I tell you what, this week you've got quite a story to tell. A couple months ago it pertained to Maryland and in colleges and losing people, but, you know, out of tragedy comes these stories sometimes that you investigate even further, and this is one of these stories in Texas that certainly you started to peel back the onion, and I think it speaks a lot to what's going on in our country with politics and with football and where all of this intersects. And David, a pleasure to have you on today. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for your interest, Nestor. Really appreciate it.
Well, tell me about the story, and it's going to be airing on Real Time this week, or Real Sports this week. Not Real Time, that's also on HBO, but Real Sports this week. You went down to Texas and sort of peeled back a football story that became a little bit more than that, right?
That's right. It's it's one of the sort of probably the most painfully familiar, often polarizing stories in contemporary America. White cop shoots black kid. He's unarmed. He hasn't done anything wrong, and everyone struggles to figure out what happened and then why. In this case, the young man was 15-year-old freshman high school football player in Mesquite, Texas, which is a small suburban town east of Dallas. And the impact on his community, which being in Texas is obsessed with football, of course, and on his team in particular, allowed us to sort of look at the case through the lens of sport, and find some really remarkable and unexpected twists.
You know, I get the stick to sports stuff out on Twitter, and you wisely, David, stay off Twitter. Good for you, other than the Real Sports handle as well. This is where the whole Kaepernick thing and the Reed thing begins, right? Like that. These were the kinds of stories that led to Kaepernick, that has now led to where we are with the national anthem and the president and the flag and big business in America. And but these were the stories that their story, it's a local story that sort of goes away until Kaepernick doesn't go away, and the league pulls itself into this, the government and politics has pulled itself into this, and you go down to Texas and find a story about a grieving family and a grieving community, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. This for this high school football team in Mesquite, Texas, this was precisely the kind of story that had created or contributed to a national crisis. And so you have all of a sudden this shocked community, including 150 15, 16, 17-year-old boys on the football team that are mourning the loss of their teammate. That are furious about the official story of how this gentle 15-year-old boy who had never been in trouble, who's an honor roll student, ends up with a bullet in his head from a policeman's rifle, and the unraveling of the fact pattern in the story and its impact on the community is really what we tried to bring into focus for viewers.
You know, I think when these stories, for a guy like you, when I always say this, when Real Sports knocks on the door, it's 60 minutes, and you're there to investigate something, and a lot of people dive behind desks, right? I mean, and clearly when there's a police shooting of any kind, I'm from Baltimore, we're aware of everything that's happened in our city after Freddie Gray, and police corruption and police planning this, and now the body camera thing comes up, and look, I'm talking to 2 county executive hopefuls this week here in my community just to start to talk to politicians about what their points of view are on all of this stuff, because now the police have these video mechanisms on them that I think everyone's becoming familiar with for good and bad reasons in a lot of different ways in a lot of different communities. This was a story a little bit about that as well, right?
That's right, and body cameras. There's just no question about it. They're a game changer in this respect. It allows you to look at documentary evidence of an event in real time as it unfolds, and people can always sort of disagree about what they're seeing on those tapes, but you can only imagine what might have happened in a case like this in the absence of that kind of evidence. And in this case, it was critical evidence. The night that Jordan lost his life was captured on two body-worn video cameras by the two officers that responded. They end up having very different perspectives and points of view and perceptions of threat. And all that sort of comes out in the court case. There's just so many rare and unexpected aspects of this particular case. And one of them is that often an officer involved in a shooting like this is not indicted. In this case, he was. When there's an indictment, there's rarely a conviction. In this case, there was. The jury was mostly white.
And this is recently, right? The conviction was like in the last 6 weeks, right? 8 weeks, right?
Yeah. The end of August 29th. This police officer in Dallas was convicted of murder in this case, and the conviction, the court case, really did turn on 9 seconds of video captured on his camera and on that of his partner. So no question about it. The body cameras are a game changer in this, and you would hope that they are not only protection for the public but also for police officers who are doing their jobs the right way, and so police officers themselves they want the documentary record. In this case, it allowed justice to be served, and while that won't bring back this young man, it does matter when justice is served in a case like this in particular.
David Scott is a veteran television journalist, and he's with Real Sports with Brian Gumbel this week, airing a piece about a tragedy in Texas, and came to our attention as well. And, the sports side of this for you, because you've done so many, you've gone all over the world doing all sorts of stuff in the World Cup in Qatar, and I'd love to talk to you about that at some point, as well as MMA-related stuff. So I've seen you do. What drew you to this story, and what was the sports side of this story, that this was a football player, right? And I guess it was a football team, and at first this didn't look like there was going to be any justice served in this case, right?
Well, that's exactly right. We have been painfully aware of this national crisis of policing in the black community, and it's been brought into sharp focus by by Cap and the other pro football players that have taken their protest to the gridiron. This time, the poster boy was a young football player himself, and this time Dallas became the latest sort of setting for these events to play out. And so, the sort of the context of football in that community in particular, in Texas, where everyone is obsessed with the sport. Allowed us Real Sports to look at what is truly a chronic crisis in contemporary America, and to find that there are aspects of this particular shooting that I think will surprise people, because while race is certainly part of the context for the shooting, the town was one of these white flight towns that developed in the 50s and 60s and remained virtually all white until the 1990s, and then flipped. So today it's 80% brown and black, but the police force there never changed accordingly. So the police force is still 80% white. That's never a good thing in policing, when the makeup of the force doesn't reflect the community. But there's no evidence really that race was part of the pretext for the shooting, and the evidence there points to a very different phenomenon that the government has actually been warning American police departments about for 10 years, and that is that combat veterans who learn to exercise force and authority in the context of war, some of them, and I want to emphasize this, not all, not most, but some of them have difficulty transitioning from one set of rules of engagement to another. And so you have combat vets who are returning to the U.S. and reintegrating or integrating into American police departments. And some of them carry so much baggage from war that that's a very difficult transition. And this officer, for example, he first learned to exercise force and authority, not as a police officer, but as a soldier on active duty in Iraq. And then he comes back and he has a series of incidents that suggest that this guy, might be carrying that kind of baggage. He might actually be suffering some form of PTSD. And the police psychologists have a word for it. They call it hypervigilance. And what that means is you basically train your brain to see threat where it doesn't exist. It makes sense when you're patrolling the streets of Baghdad, and you need to see threat around every corner and literally in every man, woman, and child. But it's the last thing you want in policing an American community. And our reporting turned up evidence, as did the court case, that the officer who shot that boy might actually have symptoms that align with this phenomenon of hypervigilance. That's one of the unexpected things that turn up in this case, and I think that that it becomes a real takeaway from the whole case. There are 500,000 police officers in this country. 100,000 of them are veterans. Some number of those are combat veterans, and some number of those might come back with some form of PTSD that forces them to see threat where it doesn't exist. It could probably help keep them alive in Iraq or Afghanistan, but it's the last thing we want on the streets of our own communities.
Complex story. It's tragedy in Texas. David Scott joining us here from Real Sports and HBO. You can check it out all week long. It's not TV. It's HBO. David, I don't want to ambush you with this, but I see it on your resume here about the World Cup in Qatar. I'd be remiss if I didn't at least give 90 seconds to you and say, I know you researched this a couple of years ago. It is an amazing story, right? FIFA and the World Cup, like the thickness of that as a sports and political and money and multinational. I mean, everything involving the World Cup's incredible. And the next time around, they're going to stop the whole world's soccer to go play in 120 degrees. It's an incredible thing what money has done in our culture in this century, huh?
Well, I was thinking about this yesterday. How one of the things that we love about the whole world of sport is that it is sport is one of the few things in, frankly, human existence that incites the passions of people, of all of us, to such an extreme level. I mean, we really lose our minds over sports, and it's become this multi-billion-dollar industry. In fact, it's really a sort of economy and ecosystem of on its own when you think about it. And all of that is really brought into sharp focus in the story of the World Cup, and especially the 2022 World Cup planned for Qatar. This is a place that doesn't have a rich soccer tradition. They wouldn't ever have had a team that qualified for a World Cup. They are hosting the games in a place where you couldn't frankly pick a worse climate to do so. They have to go through all these gymnastics to just figure out how to make it the climate sort of accommodate so many fans and athletes. There is the bribery scandals. There is the huge media money involved, and but for its really endless wealth, it's very hard to imagine how Qatar ever becomes the host of the world's most popular game's biggest game.
What was the old line, Rick James? Cocaine's a hell of a drug. I'd say oil's a hell of a drug, isn't it? Right?
Well put.
Well, and they're actually going to go through with it. I mean, I guess, look, if they can have Super Bowls in Minnesota and play an outdoor Super Bowl in New York and the weather, and I guess they could say the weather one way or another, but the real story about how the Russian and Qatari World Cup bids have gone down is about an organization that really didn't have a home or a law it sort of governed itself by, like literally, right? There were.
That's right. That's right. Well, FIFA is an organization on which there's no controlling authority. They do what they want. The executive committee of FIFA is an incredible story in itself. I mean, the way they fly around the world and frankly, often induce bidding countries to cater to them, even to soliciting bribes. These bids have become tainted. There's no question about it. And FIFA as an organization is among many of the sports governing bodies that are holed up in places like Monaco or Lausanne, and they've really lost the plot. The money isn't going to develop young football players from around the world as much as it is lining the pockets of those ExCo members, and that's why the U.S. Department of Justice finally got involved in it, because it is so corrupt, such a corrupting influence, and you wonder where the bottom is, because Sepp Blatter left the organization, but his handpicked successor took it over, and we have not seen the promised reforms. Nobody is reviewing in any serious way whether or not Qatar should ultimately host the games in 2022. That seems like a fait accompli.
Well, they gave us the cup in 26, so it's all fixed, right? I mean, we got ours, right? Literally.
Right. That's right. It's going to come back here, and who knows? Maybe that was in some ways a response, a reaction to the 2018 and 22 bids that have been really indicted, not in the legal sense, but certainly in the court of public opinion. But you really wonder and you worry about where this whole trend leads, and whether sports governing bodies can get back on course and properly serve their sports and their athletes and the audience. But as it stands now, the money has really become the driving factor. Everybody knows it. Everybody also knows that we're going to watch those games in any event, wherever they are. So probably until we as viewers who create the demand for this product, take a stronger stand, the ban will play on, and we'll just see more and more of it. But you're absolutely right. There's no controlling authority on organizations like FIFA, and that's where the problem begins.
Well, then we have our own issues with Major League Baseball and the NFL and how big they are and antitrust and all that stuff in our own culture. That's next week's story for you, though, at HBO Real Sports. He is David Scott, veteran television journalist and a producer and correspondent with HBO's Real Sports, and with Brian Gumbel, a piece on tragedy in Texas that I would refer everyone to out at HBO to check it out. David, really appreciate you making some time and having a great chat with us, and I'm glad I dragged the FIFA conversation into, because it's something I rail about around here. But all that being said, I hope we get a few games in Baltimore.
Well, thank you so much for your interest, for having me on. It's always a pleasure, Nestor.
You got it. David Scott from HBO and Real Sports joining us there. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at the Lee Tessier team, Baltimore's premier realty team, and the folks I trust with my real estate transactions, with over 50 years of experience helping local buyers and sellers, just like you and me, locating the finest properties and then negotiating the best deals and getting them done. It's their job to know about the latest market conditions and the government stuff, the paperwork, so you don't have to worry about that. Go to LeeTessier.com to learn more about what they do. Also, our friends at Cole Roofing, sponsor of our community and charity series. 99 years they've been doing roofs in our area, celebrating 100 years next year. Don't let it goof on your roof. You need Cole Roofing and Pfister Energy. And, of course, our community and charity series heard here on Thursdays. And if you have a great story, a community event, something where you're raising dough, I had Matt Stover earlier in the week with this philanthropy fund as well. So anybody out there, you want to get on, throw me a note. We'd love to hear your story and tell your story as well. You can find me nasty at WNST.net. I'm also out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed. Also, the Maryland Jockey Club and our friends at Laurel. We had a beautiful day at Maryland Million the other day. Good times down there. Make sure you're checking out the new sports bar down at Laurel. It's beautiful. Food's great. Ponies look great. The grass looked great. They were running out on the turf. It's beautiful. Get on down to Laurel and check it out. They sponsor our morning newspaper. Also, the entries at the front of WNST.net. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.